So for my machinima, I went to the website iCivics and I wanted to check out one that I saw called Argument Wars. Right away, the title got to me because argument is definitely something that we work on at the high school. It is in the standards, it is in college and career readiness standards, it is something that we work on in English 104. There's a really good textbook out called Everything is an Argument when it comes down to it. When we're talking about critical thinking and being able to make claims and support them. Not only is argument part of the standards, but actually there is a Supreme Court case in here because the basis of argument wars is you choose a lawyer and you choose a sides on famous Supreme Court cases, and then there's some mechanics here that have you pick the best support and to ultimately argue your case. And one of the cases that are in here, Texas versus Johnson, it's actually in the sophomore year textbook. So I thought that was really neat right away too that you could play either side. So the one that you're watching here is Brown versus Board of Education, and you can switch sides. You can argue on the side of Brown, or you can argue on the side of Board of Education. And I have tried it both ways, and you can uh, get a winning victory, even if it's not what um, historically happened in the case. They do let you know how it played out in real life. So you can see the mechanics here is that you have to choose from cards that give you options of support, and then you add that to your argument. And at the beginning, you had to even choose what your main argument is, what your central idea is, what part of the Constitution this Supreme Court case has to do with. And you get feedback right away because as soon as you click which thing that you're going to use for the basis, it gives you a correct or incorrect. And when you play the cards, the judge is either going to accept it or tell you that it is not a good piece of support. So right here, I like where the player is going. They accepted my argument. And then sometimes you get this screen here that has you go further and have to connect the piece of evidence that you're using to your main argument. So if my main argument is about unequal treatment for Brown versus Board of Education, I have to connect this earlier Supreme Court case. And the different cards mean different things as well. So that's something that you learn in higher order of what gets accepted as you play. A lot of times having precedents, having those cards that have the picture of the Supreme Court versus these ones here that are files, those are facts, and then ones that have a light bulb, those will be ideas. And when your opponent plays, you have the option to object, but if you're going to object, you have to make sure that it is something that is non-logical. They're not using logos or logical appeal. So this part here is a case that actually has two main arguments. It is the case about whether or not the states should pay for right to attorney. And you have to not only decide which piece of evidence to use, but you have to decide which of your main central arguments it fits with. So you can see, again, there's all these different cases that you can use, like Brown versus Board of Education, Texas versus Johnson. So again, with this case too, you can also, it's not completely linear because you can argue a case one way and then you can switch it and represent the other side and see if you can be successful. I think some of the strengths of this game is it constantly provides you with feedback as to how successful you're being with the choices that you're making, because again, it's either going to give you a cue and the Judge Thorem is going to tell you whether that was accepted or not, or he'll tell you if it's not correct, or your opponent will successfully object to it as well. So you get that feedback right away again, and this is over a topic that students often see sometimes need a lot of help with in making sure that they are making logical arguments and how they're using support, not just using support. So it gives you that feedback. It's talking about argumentation, which is a big deal. It's training students to use support in a logical way. It isn't completely linear in that, again, you can choose which side that you want to uh, play with. I can see assigning this to my English 10 students on the Chromebooks when we do Texas versus Johnson. So when we do Texas versus Johnson and what we read is actually two different pieces, the court case, the majority opinion, and then we also read a op-ed that also agrees with the majority opinion, so giving students a chance to interact with these texts and to see what side they would argue. And there are some interactive elements to the website as well, as it does let you create an account. And when you create an account, you can get achievements. So, for example, I have achievements for playing so many games and playing so many cards. And you can see too at the end of the victory, they tell you what the historic result is of the case. You can print out a certificate. That could be a way of holding students accountable. They would have to print out their certificate, and you could have that be turned in for grade if you needed to have some sort of proof or outcome statement to show what you're doing. If people don't always take these games seriously, you can have that piece of paper as something tangible. There's also a leaderboard. So you play the games, you earn the points, and then you spend the points. And it says that you could use them to support causes, and then they donate to those causes. And I think with the leaderboard, particularly, it might be a little bit encouraging to students' sense of competition. I know with my students, even Quizlet, sometimes they'll want to knock each other down or play against each other to see who can match the definitions faster. So having a leaderboard where they can compete might be something that is motivational to students. So overall, I think this is a pretty good example of a serious game. It's one that I certainly can see a case for using in my English 10 classes. I will certainly share this with my colleagues. Um, the things that I rated it highest on the rubric was having a clear purpose that correlates with multiple learning objectives, standards pertaining to coursework, definitely, because we get that argument in there. Narrative, context, storyline, because it does provide this opportunity to look through other avenues, and even avenues that I didn't think of in terms of playing on the other side of these court cases that have already been decided. And it definitely does a good job of feedback because right away you get this result of whether or not what you chose was logical or not. Where I ranked it towards the middle is well organized, risk oriented problem solving. Uh, I don't think it was particularly transformative. You're able to finish the game with an added skill or transformed worldview. The user should come away from the experience being able to easily discuss with others using interpretation. Yes, because they're interpreting the cases. Metacognition, you have to know why you're choosing what you're choosing to know where to place it. It does provide engaging and motivation because it varies in activity. It's not too easy. It's not too hard. Skill scaffolding and mastery is the same thing. The different levels of the game build upon prior learned skills because as you go in the cases, each one is a little bit different. As I said, this one added a different mechanic where there was two main arguments that you were doing. I would have liked if it went up like that continuously, but so far this is the only case that I've seen that has that scaffolding in it. Um, and it's easy to understand. It's not completely difficult. It's not too difficult, but it's not super exciting in terms of challenge level either. It would be nice if there was a little bit more of an interactive element to it besides just the leaderboard and the point system, but overall I think this is something I would use, and I'd be excited to see how it works out, and maybe I can report back after next semester how it worked out with my English 10 students.